Have you ever stood at the foot of a mountain you desperately wanted to climb? Not a literal mountain of rock and ice, but a mountain of ambition, the novel you were born to write, the business you daydream about launching, the marathon you promised yourself you'd run. You can see the summit, clear as day in your mind's eye. You can feel the exhilaration of standing up there, the sense of accomplishment, the person you would become. You are filled with fire, a brilliant, roaring inferno of motivation. You buy the new running shoes. You clear your desk. You register the domain name. And for a day, maybe a week, that fire burns hot. But then something happens. The flames begin to flicker. The summit looks a little further away, the path a little steeper. The daily reality of the climb sets in, the sheer, overwhelming distance between where you are and where you want to be. And slowly, quietly, without a single dramatic moment of surrender, the fire goes out. The dream doesn't die in a blaze of failure. It dies from a quiet, creeping starvation of momentum. Why does this happen? Why do our grandest and most heartfelt ambitions so often wither on the vine? It's not because we are lazy, and it's not because we lack passion. It's because we misunderstand the very nature of the journey. We are tricked by the allure of the summit, and we forget that a mountain is not conquered in a single leap. This is a universal question that haunted Jack Moore, not as an academic puzzle, but as a deeply personal wound. He was a man who saw these abandoned dreams littered everywhere, like ghost ships in a harbor, and he became obsessed not just with understanding why they failed, but with finding the precise, mechanical blueprint for building a vessel that could actually reach the other shore. This is the story of his obsession and the profound, surprisingly simple truth he uncovered. Jack Moore's quest began not in a laboratory or a university library, but in the quiet desperation of his own office, staring at a blinking cursor on a blank page. Moore was an investigative journalist, and a very good one. He had a reputation for untangling complex narratives, for finding the human story inside monolithic systems. And he found the story of a lifetime, a sprawling, intricate case of corporate malfeasance that stretched across continents and decades. This was his mountain, a book that would not only make his career but would, he believed, create genuine change. He signed the contract, received the advance, and set to work at that familiar, roaring fire of initial passion. He spent months gathering string, conducting preliminary interviews, and amassing a mountain of data, thousands of pages of internal documents, financial reports, and leaked emails. His apartment became a chaotic archive of evidence, with boxes stacked in every corner and a sprawling corkboard on the wall, connected by a spiderweb of red yarn. But when the time came to transform this chaos into a coherent narrative, to actually begin the act of writing, he hit a wall. The sheer scale of the project was paralyzing. Every morning, he would sit down with the noble intention to write the book, a goal so vast and amorphous it was essentially meaningless. Where did he even start? With the financial fraud in the 1990s? The whistleblower who came forward in 2008? The CEO's carefully constructed public persona? Each thread he pulled seemed connected to a dozen others. He would write a single paragraph, read it back, and feel a wave of inadequacy. It was a drop of water in an ocean of work. The chasm between his single, flawed paragraph and the finished, beautiful book on a shelf was so immense it felt like an insult. The blinking cursor became a silent mockery of his ambition. His days devolved into a pattern of what he called productive procrastination. He would spend 8 hours meticulously organizing digital files, color-coding his research, or convincing himself he needed to conduct just one more interview before he could truly begin. The fire was dwindling, replaced by a cold dread. The project that was meant to be his masterpiece was becoming the monument to his own failure. The crisis point arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. His editor called, a friendly check-in that felt like an interrogation. He asked how the first few chapters were coming along, and Moore, for the first time in his professional life, had to lie. He mumbled something about structuring the early narrative, about complex groundwork, but the hollow feeling in his stomach told him the truth. He was not making progress. He was treading water, and the tide was pulling him out to sea. That night, he stared at his corkboard, at the tangled web of his own making, and felt the crushing weight of his own dream. He was living the very paradox he'd seen in so many others. His ambition wasn't fueling him. It was crushing him. It was then that he made a decision. He couldn't write his book. Not yet. First, he had to figure out how anyone ever finishes anything worthwhile. He turned his formidable investigative skills away from the corporate scandal and onto a new, more urgent mystery: the mechanics of human progress. His own failure was now Exhibit A. Moore's investigation began with a simple, humbling admission. His approach was wrong. The idea of staying motivated to tackle a huge goal was a fantasy. Motivation, he began to suspect, wasn't the cause of action. It was the effect. To test this, he sought out people in teams who had succeeded against overwhelming odds, looking for a shared pattern. He found it in the most unexpected of places, a struggling software startup called Aperture Labs. Their mountain was a revolutionary new app, a project so complex that the final launch date was 2 years away. When Moore first met the team, morale was at rock bottom. They were a collection of brilliant but burnt-out engineers who felt like they were coding into a void. The distant goal of launching the app provided no daily nourishment, no sense of accomplishment. Their lead engineer, a woman named Elena, was watching her team disintegrate from sheer exhaustion and disillusionment. In a moment of desperation, she decided to try something radical. She threw out the master project plan with its distant, meaningless milestones. Instead, she broke the entire colossal project down into the smallest conceivable units of work. The tasks were almost comically tiny. One day, a developer's entire job was to make a single login button turn from gray to green when a correct password was entered. Another's was to fix a subtle alignment issue on the settings page that was off by 2 pixels. At the end of each day, the entire team would gather for what they called the 5-minute win. Whoever had finished their tiny task would project their screen and demonstrate it. They'd show the button turning green. They'd show the perfectly aligned text. And the team would cheer. It was, on the surface, absurd. These were highly paid engineers celebrating a color change. But Moore, in observing this ritual, saw the genius in it. Elena had stopped trying to motivate her team with the promise of a future summit. Instead, she was giving them a small, tangible hill to conquer every single day. The abstract concept of progress became a concrete, visible, and emotionally satisfying reality. The psychological shift was profound. The team stopped dreading the vastness of the project and started looking forward to their small, daily dose of victory. This small, consistent feeling of forward movement created a powerful feedback loop. The win, no matter how minor, generated a flicker of positive emotion. That emotion provided the fuel for the next day's work, which in turn created another win. This, Moore realized, was a secret. He named it the progress principle. The single most powerful human motivator is not a big reward, a charismatic leader, or an inspiring mission statement. It is the undeniable, visceral feeling of making meaningful progress. Armed with this insight, Moore turned back to his own project. He took down the intimidating corkboard. He stopped thinking about writing the book. His goal for the next day was simple: transcribe 15 minutes of one audio interview. He did it. It took less than an hour. But at the end, he had a tangible artifact of his effort, a page and a half of double-spaced text. It wasn't a chapter. It wasn't even good prose, but it was done. It was visible. It was progress. And for the first time in months, he felt not dread, but a tiny spark of satisfaction. The next day, his goal was to write 200 words summarizing that transcription. The day after, it was to find and verify a single statistic mentioned in the interview. The mountain hadn't shrunk, but he had stopped staring at the summit. He was focused only on the next secure foothold, and for the first time, he felt himself beginning to climb. For a while, the progress principle felt like a magic bullet. Moore was making steady, measurable headway on his book. The daily ritual of completing a small task and logging in his journal was creating the positive feedback loop he had witnessed at Aperture Labs. But then, the system began to show its cracks. He had a week of incredible productivity, knocking out 5 straight days of his small goals. He was on a roll. On the 6th day, he sat down to write a 300-word character sketch of a key figure in the scandal. But the words wouldn't come. He struggled for hours, and the result was a mess. He missed his target. The next day, An unexpected family issue pulled him away from his desk entirely. 2 missed days. The psychological impact was staggering. The positive feelings from the 5 previous days of wins evaporated in an instant, replaced by a disproportionately large wave of guilt and frustration. The chain was broken, and it felt like all his momentum was gone. It felt like a total failure. Why, he wondered, did 2 days of setbacks feel so much more powerful than 5 days of success? The emotional math didn't add up. This complication sent him on the second phase of his quest, forcing him to look deeper. He realized that making progress was only half the battle. The other, more critical half was dealing with the inevitable reality of setbacks. He delved into psychology of loss aversion, the well-documented principle that we feel the pain of a loss about twice as much as we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain. He saw this playing out in his own work, but he needed to understand how to counteract it. His search led him to the world of elite athletics, specifically to an ultramarathon runner named David. David was training for a brutal 100-mile race, and he was a master of consistency. Moore began following his training regimen, expecting to see a story of heroic, unwavering discipline. What he found was far more nuanced and instructive. David used the small wins principle religiously, with a daily mileage goal. But he had a crucial modification. Early in his career, he, like Moore, found that missing a single day's goal was psychologically devastating. If he planned to run 10 miles and only managed 8 because of a nagging injury or terrible weather, the day was mentally filed under failure. This single loss would poison his motivation for days to come. The asymmetry was destroying him. So he redesigned his system. Instead of having a single binary goal, succeed or fail, he created what he called a success spectrum. For any given day, he had 3 tiers of success. The gold medal goal was his ideal target, run 10 miles. The silver medal goal was a solid, respectable effort, run 6 miles. And the bronze medal goal was almost laughably easy, just put on his running shoes and get out the door for a minimum of 1 mile. The genius of the system was that it almost completely eliminated the possibility of a 0 day, a day of total failure. Even on his worst days, when he was exhausted, sore, or time crunched, he could almost always muster the energy to hit the bronze goal. And by doing so, he maintained the single most important thing, the unbroken chain of success. He could go to bed not thinking, I failed to run 10 miles, but I succeeded in my commitment to run today. This, Moore realized, was a deeper truth. The second and arguably more important principle was this: protecting your momentum from setbacks is more critical than achieving big wins. The real secret to long-term achievement isn't just about accumulating progress. It's about building a psychological fortress around your momentum. It's about ensuring that the inevitable headwinds of life don't extinguish your flame. Moore immediately applied this to his writing. His goal might be to write 500 new words. Silver was to edit the previous day's work. And bronze? Just open a manuscript document and read 1 page. It was so simple it felt like cheating. But it worked. On days he felt uninspired, he would open the document, hit his bronze goal, and feel the quiet satisfaction of having kept his promise to himself. More often than not, the simple act of opening the document would lead to a little bit of tinkering, which would sometimes blossom into a full-blown silver or even gold day. The bronze goal wasn't just a safety net. It was a launch pad. He had discovered the crucial defense system his engine of progress had been missing. Moore now held 2 powerful, seemingly distinct principles in his hands. The first was the progress principle. The engine of motivation is fueled by small, visible wins. The second was the asymmetry of setbacks. The pain of a small loss is far greater than the pleasure of a small win, meaning your primary job is to protect your momentum. He had been treating them as 2 separate tactics, a 1-2 punch against procrastination. But as he stood in his office one evening, looking at his now growing manuscript, he saw that they weren't 2 ideas at all. They were 2 components of a single, elegant machine. The grand, unifying idea hit him with the force of a revelation. The goal was never about the individual wins or the defense against individual losses. The goal was to build a self-perpetuating momentum engine. This was a synthesis. This was a aha. a moment where everything clicked into place. The small wins would fuel, the pistons firing over and over to move the machine forward. Each successful day, each check mark in a journal, was a small injection of high-octane emotional fuel. But an engine running in the open air is vulnerable. A single splash of muddy water, a bad day, an unexpected critique, a moment of self-doubt, could clog the works and bring it grinding to a halt. The system of protecting progress, the tiered goals of gold, silver, and bronze, was the engine's casing. It was a durable, protective housing that shielded the delicate inner workings from the inevitable grit and friction of reality. It ensured that even on the worst days, the engine never completely shut down. It might idle, it might sputter, but it would never go cold. But the true genius of Momentum Engine, the part that elevated it from a mere productivity hack to a philosophy of personal transformation, was what happened when it ran for long enough. When you build an unbroken chain of wins, no matter how small, something profound begins to shift. Your identity changes. Moore realized he had stopped thinking of himself as a journalist struggling to write a book. He had simply become a writer. Why? Because writers write. And he was writing every single day. The daily action of hitting his bronze goal, at minimum, was casting a daily vote for his new identity. The person who puts on their running shoes and goes out the door every single day, even for just a mile, is no longer someone trying to get in shape. They are a runner. The momentum engine doesn't just get you to your destination. It fundamentally reforges the person who is on the journey. The feedback loop becomes complete. The action reinforces the identity, and the identity, in turn, makes the action feel not like a chore, but like a natural expression of who you are. This was the ultimate payoff. The struggle to find motivation dissolves, because a writer writes and a runner runs. It is what they do. The mountain doesn't get smaller, but you become a climber, and the act of climbing becomes your nature. So we return to where we began, to that feeling of standing at the foot of your mountain. We now understand why the fire of our ambition so often dies. We starve it of its only real fuel, the feeling of progress, and we leave exposed to the harsh winds of everyday setbacks. The journey Jack Moore took, from the depths of his own paralysis to the discovery of the momentum engine, provides us with a new map. It is a blueprint not for a single, heroic leap to the summit, but for a sustainable, relentless, and identity-shaping climb. The blueprint is simple, and it is available to you right now. First, atomize your goal. Forget writing the novel. Your goal is write 100 words. Forget launching the business. Your goal is send one outreach email. Find the smallest, most concrete, most visible unit of progress and make that your target. Second, build your fortress. Define your success spectrum. Set a gold, silver, and bronze goal for your daily practice. Make your bronze goal so ridiculously achievable that it is harder to avoid doing it than to just do it. Put on your gym clothes. Open the blank document. Wash one dish. This is not lowering the bar. It is ensuring you never have a day where you feel like a failure. Third, and most importantly, fall in love with the chain. Your real objective is not the outcome. It is the process. The real win is not finishing the marathon. It is adding one more link to your unbroken chain of showing up. Celebrate the streak. Worship the consistency. Because understanding this is one thing, but acting on it is everything. This knowledge is a map, but you still have to take the first step. So I invite you to make a commitment, not to this channel, but to yourself. Choose one mountain, just one, and for tomorrow, define your bronze medal. What is the one tiny, almost laughable step you can take to begin your chain? By subscribing, you're not just joining an audience, you're joining a community of climbers. Each of us focus on our own next step, building our own momentum engines, link by link. You are casting a vote for the person you intend to become. The journey 1,000 miles truly does begin with a single step, but the secret is that it's also built, sustained, and completed by 1,000 single steps, taken one day at a time. Because the biggest dreams are not conquered, they are